Chapter 1. "This place makes the best potato skins in the world," Dante Ramirez said from his position next to Eve Knox in the overcrowded booth. 6 were stuffed into room for 5, but Eve wasn't complaining. It had been months since she'd laughed this much, and laughing felt good for a change.
"Well, for as long as they made us wait, they'd better be,"
Gabe Teague said in annoyance from the other side of Eve. His deep bass shook the air around him.
"I just want you to know if Ashley kills me, I'm sending you the bill."
"And it'll be stamped NSF just like all the rest of the bills I pay," Dante said.
"NSF? I thought you had some secret trust fund,"
Jeff Taylor said from beside his wife Lisa.
"Yeah, it's so secret, I don't even know about it,"
Dante said with a shake of his head, and the gel-slicked black hair caught the light like a reflector.
"Darn," Gabe said. "You mean we can't off you for your millions?"
"Millions of bills or millions of creditors?" Jeff looked at Gabe skeptically.
Maybe offing him wasn't such a good idea.
You think?" Gabe asked. "You forget, he's a fireman," Lisa said, punching her husband in the ribs. "He makes what you make." Jeff shook his head.
Definitely not worth it."
"Definitely," Gabe said, and then looked around the restaurant.
"So is anybody going to take our order, or is that going to take another 2 hours?"
"Friday night," Dante said. "It's always like this."
"Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you're out of commission."
"Married," Gabe said.
"They call it married."
Even as she laughed, Eve's gaze fell to the table. She remembered married. "So, AJ," Lisa said, addressing one of the 2 non-conversational occupants at the table, "were you less nervous this year?" AJ, the one person at the table that Eve hadn't been around at every excuse Jeff and Lisa could come up with. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, every major holiday, and 3 or 4 non-major ones they had managed to include her in as well. If she hadn't been so tired of looking at her apartment walls, she might have come up with a few more excuses to get out of their well-meaning excursions. However, the reality was she hated that apartment and all the memories that went with it.
"At least I didn't throw up this year."
AJ ducked so that the light bounced off his light brown hair streaked with soft blonde tones. Soft. It was a good word to describe AJ Knight. Features, light brown eyes, manner, tone, they all fell right into the soft category.
"That's a definite improvement," Jeff said, laughing. "We almost had to call the other paramedics to come stitch up that gash you got when you fainted off the stage last year."
"He did not," Eve said with instant concern. "No," AJ glanced at her defensively, but instantly his gaze dropped back to the table.
"I just missed a step."
"Yeah, ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk," Jeff said, spinning his hands over and over themselves teasingly. "You're one to talk," Lisa punched Jeff again as she came to AJ's defense. "Who was it that needed a paper bag this morning before he went on?" Jeff shrugged.
"For my lunch?"
"Yeah, those ham sandwiches can just take your breath right away." Eve laughed at them, Jeff and Lisa, such a sweet couple, now looking forward to their first child. It wasn't hard to see how much Jeff worshipped Lisa, nor was it difficult to see the love in Lisa's eyes when she looked at her husband. As she put her head down, Eve remembered feeling that look in her own heart. That time seemed so long ago as to have been another lifetime.
"So, Eve,"
Dante, the one guy she always seemed to get paired up with at every social function she was trapped into attending, said as he laid an arm the color of brown sugar over the booth behind her.
"How'd Lisa con you into this speaking thing anyway?"
With a smile, Eve looked across the table at the woman who had become her best friend over the last year. "She asked." Lisa smiled back. Together, 2 women in a sea of men, and because of the other, they were holding their own.
"No arm twisting or hair pulling?"
Dante asked, far too into the whole catfight scenario for her. "Nope, none of that."
"Darn," Dante said. "I would have paid to see that."
"Hey," Jeff said, leveling an index finger and a warning gaze at Dante.
That's my wife you're talking about there.
Oh, sorry, I'm just saying she's hot.
That's not any better, Jeff said darkly.
Lisa patted his leg. It's okay. I'm 5 months pregnant and I feel like a blimp already. If the man wants to say I'm hot, don't complain. Jeff's gaze went to his wife's face and frame, and it was clear he had no complaints.
Is somebody going to take our order or not? Gabe asked in frustration.
I think they forgot about us, AJ said quietly.
Well, get somebody's attention, Jeff, Gabe commanded.
Me? Why me?
Because you're on the end, and because this was your idea, and because, as your commanding officer, I told you to, Gabe said.
Oh, Jeff said, nodding. Well, since you put it that way. He looked around, put a hand in the air, and snagged the first waitress's attention who happened by.
Could we get some menus over here?
Amazing, Eve thought as she watched the scene. When she had met him 2 years before, she would never have believed that Jeff could get so many words in a row out, in public nonetheless. However, it was abundantly clear that he had grown in confidence and in stature since the night Dustin had first brought home his newest friend from the academy. Part of it was the job. Leading others in to fight fires had to inspire a certain amount of poise and confidence. But it was more than that. He had a woman by his side now who believed in him, who trusted him implicitly, who looked to him for guidance, and it showed in every movement he made. In seconds, the waitress was back with the menus. Each took one, and Gabe looked at his watch.
Order something that doesn't take long to cook.
Like what? Kids' grilled cheese? Dante asked. You should have invited Ashley, Lisa said.
Yeah, Jeff said. Why didn't you?
She had to work. Besides, she's heard me speak, and she wasn't impressed. Gabe, take you, Ashley, Dante said, serious and teasing all at the same time. I can see why. Eve socked Dante's arm. Hey, that wasn't funny. In surprise, Dante looked over to Jeff, who was trying not to laugh. It was too, wasn't it, Taylor?
Like I'm stupid enough to get in the middle of that one,
Jeff said as he buried his gaze into the menu. The waitress walked up at that moment to take their order, and when she was gone, Dante turned back to Eve.
You know, that Van Gogh exhibit is coming to the Museum of Fine Arts the 1st of November. Didn't you say you wanted to go to that?
Is it that time already? She sighed. I was hoping I'd be through the spring buying by then.
Well, I'm free, Dante said, hinting in his tone. If you wanted me to get us some tickets, I could.
He was being nice. Dante had been nothing but nice since the first time Jeff and Lisa had dragged them out on what no one dared to call a double date. Still, every time Eve thought about going out with him, her heart jerked in the other direction. Slowly, she shook her head. I'm not sure I can get off.
It's a Saturday, he said, as though the others weren't sitting there listening to them. Even firefighters don't work all the time, you know.
He tapped her on the shoulder playfully, trying to get her to look up. However, her heart just couldn't look at him. Wishing it wouldn't, Eve's gaze traveled down the table and caught Lisa's. The pity in Lisa's eyes told her too much. Her friends felt sorry for her. They wanted her to find someone. What they didn't know was that there would never be another someone in her life. She'd had a someone once. Now he was gone, and she had no desire to find another one.
A museum exhibit? Gabe asked incredulously. Ugh, Ashley roped me into one of those once. Can you say Torture City?
Across from Eve, AJ laughed, although none of the other occupants seemed to think it was all that funny. She ducked to keep the laugh in her own chest from finding her own throat.
I just thought it might be fun,
Dante said softly, and suddenly he didn't look nearly so confident or so sure of the offer. Knowing there was really no good reason to turn him down, Eve smiled over at him, although to be honest, she didn't see him at all. It sounds like fun. On the other side of the table, AJ felt the annoyed gazes of his hosts find his face, and his eyes widened as if to say, "What did I say?" Neither Jeff nor Lisa looked happy with him. He hadn't been around them all that much, but Eve didn't seem like someone who would be hanging out in museums all day. The mall looked more her style. But as much as she didn't, Dante seemed even less the type. Strong, take charge, get it done so you can go have fun. That was Dante. Someone more likely to make fun of people who went to museums than someone lining up for tickets. However, it was perfectly clear from where AJ sat that getting in the way of Dante and Eve invited a fate worse than death. He understood that, of course. He had been there at the graveyard the day she had buried her husband. He had sat in the church and listened to Jeff's heartfelt words about the friend he had lost. But more than that, he had been there that awful night when her husband had taken that final ambulance ride. Yes, she had lost more than he would probably ever have, so he was smart enough to back off, even when Gabe continued.
"Doesn't make any sense to me," Gabe said. "You meet someone, you go out with them, you try to make yourself be someone else the whole time, then you get married, and boom! Who are you again?"
"I'm sure Ashley was thrilled when she figured out who you were," Jeff said, and AJ could tell he was trying to steer the conversation in a different direction.
"Ashley?" Gabe asked incredulously. "What about me? The first time I saw her with that awful green mask thing on, I thought I'd pass out."
"She was trying to be beautiful for you," Lisa said. Gabe scrunched up his face.
"She didn't have to try that hard."
The waitress arrived with their drinks and a dish of potato skins. A plate at a time, Lisa passed them around the table. "I am starving."
"Here," Jeff said, dishing one potato skin onto a plate for her.
"Hey," Dante said, "who ordered these?"
"If you're pregnant, you argue." Jeff leveled the fork in Dante's direction. "If not, get out of the way."
He put some sauce on the plate and handed it to Lisa. "There you go." "Thanks," she said, ducking in embarrassment. AJ watched as the others dished up their own appetizers. Jeff was always taking care of Lisa, always making sure she was all right before he worried about himself. That was how love should be, AJ thought. Not that he'd ever been around that many people who had found it. No, finding that kind of love took a heap of luck, and to this point he hadn't had much in that department.
"So, AJ," Gabe said, skewering him with a glance, "who are you taking to museums these days?"
Slowly AJ shrugged, and the potato skin on his fork nearly slid right off into his lap.
"No museums for me."
Then he looked across and caught the displeasure in Lisa's gaze.
"Not that there's anything wrong with museums, of course.
He was drowning, fighting for the surface.
"Well, there's Melody, but she's more of just a friend, really." "A friend? Oh boy. You've got to watch those friends," Gabe said with a serious shake of his head. "That's what I told everybody about Ash for a year."
"Until she knocked you over the head with a frying pan?" Jeff asked.
"Something like that. I swear I think you ladies have something figured out that you should really clue us guys in about," Gabe said.
"We try to be subtle," Lisa said. "Not our fault it takes a brick."
"I'm telling you," Gabe said, leaning over to AJ, although his volume was loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Watch out for those friends. They're trouble waiting to happen."
"I'll keep that in mind." By 8 o'clock, the gathering was breaking up. Jeff said he had to get Lisa home. Gabe slipped out as soon as the checks arrived, saying Ashley might never let him out of her sight again. AJ had offered to walk Gabe to his car, although Eve thought that if trouble happened, Gabe looked far more likely to be the defender than AJ did. And so, when everyone else was gone, she and Dante were left to walk to the parking lot together. Subtle, she thought. So terribly, terribly subtle. As they pushed out into the cool October Houston city night, her hand brushed Dante's, and in the next breath, his hand slipped around hers. Not once in all the time they had spent together had he taken her hand, and the instant hers was in his, Eve wanted to run the other direction.
"If you don't want to do the museum thing, that's cool," Dante said. "It was just an idea."
Backing out, getting away from him, running as fast as her heart was racing, all sounded like very good ideas. And yet, what was she running from? The fact that he wasn't Dustin? He wasn't. He never would be, and neither would anyone else. Her heart fell even further at the thought. Are you sure you want to go? I kind of thought the clubs would be more of your style.
Can't a guy broaden his horizons once in a while?
No crime there. I just don't want you to be bored. Dante turned intense, deep brown eyes on her.
If you're there, I could never be bored.
Her chest hurt. She hated the look in his eyes, that don't kill me by turning me down look. For as long as she could remember, she had been a sucker for that look. True, the guys had always turned out to be nice enough, but they always had earth-shattering soulmates in mind. It never quite made it that far for Eve. If you're sure you won't be bored.
I'm sure, he said as they got to her car. I'll call you the Friday before, just to make sure.
Okay.
And I can pick you up if you want.
Oh, that's okay. There's never any telling what I'll be doing. It'll probably be better if we just meet there.
Okay, but you do want to go, right?
She nodded. I'll be there. Trying not to be obvious, she let go of his hand and climbed in her car, even as fear that he might in fact kiss her flooded through her consciousness. See you then.
Yeah.
As she pulled out of the parking lot, the act she had been corralling around her since she had met Lisa early that morning as they headed for the second annual Cordell Youth Conference dropped away. Everything was so hard. Every moment was about holding it together, watching, noticing, making sure that no one saw beneath the mask. That was how life was now that Dustin was gone. It was called getting on with life. They all wanted to help, but the truth was no one ever could. It was like being dead without being in a grave. 29 and living a hollow, empty shell of a life. If it didn't hurt so bad, she might have laughed at the irony. For it was she who had told so many people that life was not to be taken for granted, that the point was to live every single moment as if you might never have another. Yet that was exactly what she now wanted, to never have another. The moments lining up, staring her in the face, collapsed her spirit. Crying didn't help. She had come to that conclusion long ago. Pushing the thoughts back, she hit the radio button. Not even the music helped much. There were just too many thoughts, and Eve thought at that moment that there would be forever. Melody came by, AJ's mom said when he walked into the little kitchen around 9. She was looking for you. Oh? He grabbed a couple Oreos out of the cabinet. She said something about playing a game she got. He poured a glass of milk. Was she going home? She didn't say. I'll call her. His mother nodded and left the room. Picking up the phone, he dialed the number without really looking at the keypad. He'd had it memorized since he was 12. Melody Todd, tomboy extraordinaire. They had been friends so long, he had forgotten when they weren't.
Mel, hey, it's AJ.
Well, it's about time. Where have you been? I was going to show you the new Rodents Revenge game I got, but now Kendra's coming over and we're going out.
Oh, that's cool. He bit into the cookie. Have fun.
You could come with us, Melody said.
I've got work tomorrow.
Likely excuse. You just don't want me to set you up with Kendra.
Like I said, I've got work tomorrow.
Okay, I know. Shadana was a mistake. I admit that.
A mistake? AJ asked in shock. She read me my star charts before we got in the car, Mel.
I said I was sorry.
Yeah, and then you turned around and set me up with Monica. How's she doing, anyway? Has she found herself yet?
Not unless herself was hiding in the Australian outback, Melody said hesitantly.
Australia? Huh. Well, she'll be right at home with all those kangaroos. Oh, and let's not forget about Teresa, shall we?
What, you don't like table dancers?
Not when they're my date. He shook his head at the mere memory of that night. Let's get real here, shall we, Mel? You haven't exactly had a stellar track record with this matchmaking thing.
Oh, come on, AJ. Kendra's different.
Already this is not good.
No, I don't mean different. I just mean, well, different.
You're trying too hard, Mel. He ate the last bite of cookie and chased it with the milk.
Well, you're not trying hard enough. It's one night, AJ. Just one. Come on, it'll be fun.
Nope. I'm thinking 30 minutes in the garage and then I'm going to give up and hit the sack.
Melody sighed. So you're really not going then?
Nope, I'm really not going.
Fine. See if I ever try to set you up again.
Finally, he said, breathing an audible sigh of relief.
Her side went silent for a moment. How about tomorrow night? This game will explode your head.
Head explosions? Cool. Here or there? Better make it there. Mom's on a no popcorn in the living room kick again. No problem. I'll see you then. Oh, and Mel, have fun tonight.
Yeah. And hey, don't ruin your hearing, okay?
He laughed and signed off. Melody, the next-door neighbor who actually lived 5 houses down, had been his best friend forever. Well, since 6th grade anyway, but that was as close to forever as he got. With a push, he stood from the cabinet and stepped into the living room. I'm going to the garage. Offhandedly, his mother waved. Funny, even at 25, ever since moving back home a year and a half before, he had felt the need to keep his mother informed about his whereabouts. She didn't ask anymore, but he always told her just in case. When he opened the garage door, one hand went in front of him and snapped the dim light on. Over the concrete he walked until in the opposite corner he stepped up to the royal blue plastic tarp. Carefully he pulled it up and wrapped it around his arm so that the blue pearl trap set underneath came into view. From the wall he pulled the headphones on, hit the power button, and sat down on the little stool. With one drumstick, he hit the play button and twirled the stick around his fingers twice as the other picked up the first beats of the song. In seconds, he was immersed in the music, so deep, air seemed hardly necessary. He didn't sing much, but the words and the beat drifted over him like soft rain on a cool summer day. His hands traveled effortlessly to a beat he had committed to memory years before. When he hit the brake, every part of his body hit a drum and stopped, hit again and stopped. 5 consecutive hits, and he was flying on the music again. It was the one place that always felt like home to him, and he knew it always would. Good news, Lisa said 10 minutes into their phone conversation the next Tuesday evening as Eve put the finishing touches on a dish of microwaved ravioli. She licked her finger off and picked up the plate to take it to the table. Oh yeah? What's that? Gabe and Ash are having a party. Cool. Eve turned the plate a quarter turn as she sat by herself at the table. I'm sure Gabe's thrilled. Oh no, him and Jeff already have it all figured out. Pool, all night in the basement. Nice. And what are you and Ash going to do? Sit around and stare at the walls? Keep the chips and dip going, I guess. No, they're having, people from her work and his work come. He said you're welcome to come too if you want. Eve corralled her long black hair in her fingers, flipped it over one shoulder, and picked up her fork. Me? I'm not from his work. Well, it's not just people from work. Besides, I think Dante's going to be there, Lisa said. And this pertains to me how? Come on, Eve. I know he likes you, and I think if you'd just let yourself, you could like him too. He's okay, but I'm not really interested in anything serious right now. I'm not saying you are, but it doesn't hurt to go out with some friends once in a while either. Sitting there all by yourself all the time isn't getting you anywhere. You know, you sound just like... A knife went through her heart, and she sighed. When's the party? Friday at 8. You can bring a date if you want, Jeff said as AJ sat in the dark living room watching the little mouse careen one way and then the other over the crazy multicolored screen. Why are you inviting people to Gabe's party? AJ asked, leaning into the turn that Melody threatened to take too wide. He just mentioned you, and since he didn't have your number, but if you're busy, that's cool. As the mouse burst through the final door, AJ laughed when Melody threw the controller to the floor and collapsed over it. It sounds cool, but I can bring a friend? Yeah. What time? Chapter 2. AJ thought about just not going. Melody had come down with a bad case of, I have to work the late shift, and he really didn't want to go alone. However, sitting at home all night on a Friday night didn't sound like much fun either. So he found himself pulling up next to a curb 2 houses down from the house that was streaming light from every window. October would soon fade to November, and the chill was already in the air. The light orange jersey he was wearing, although just right for a party, was a little cold for walking the streets, and he crossed his arms in front of him. At the door, he didn't even have to knock as 2 people came out the other way and pushed the door open for him to enter. Carefully, he stepped in, looking around for someone he recognized. Music poured out of the speakers in one corner, and the television babbled away in the other. Hey, look who made it, Dante said, stepping from the hallway, a drink in one hand and Eve's hand in the other. AJ, my man! He dropped Eve's hand and shook AJ's. Good to see you. Hey, how's it going? You're just in time. Jeff and Gabe broke out the pool sticks downstairs. Cool. Next to Dante in his black sport jacket and white shirt, and Eve in a soft, flowing silver outfit that looked like it had been made exclusively for her graceful frame, AJ felt horribly underdressed. His hand went nervously to his backward black cap. Come on, Dante said, either not noticing or not caring. They've got a spread that you won't believe. AJ followed the 2 of them through the crowd, and for a moment he wondered how Eve wasn't absolutely freezing. From behind, he realized the blouse of her outfit had very little back to it, and it was held together only by a complex network of string. He relocated his gaze to the other partygoers. There were enough of them to hold his attention until they got to the dining room. These brownies are out of this world, Dante said, reaching for one and handing it to AJ. Here, you've got to try this. Never one to be self-conscious, AJ suddenly found himself swimming there as both gazes turned on him for his reaction. However, that thought evaporated when he put the creamy, rich pastry in his mouth. Brownie was a poor substitute of a word. Dante nodded at the look on AJ's face. See? What did I tell you? AJ's hand went up under his mouth as a piece of the brownie broke off without warning. Man, that's good. Dante's arm swung around Eve's bare shoulder possessively. She's a good cook, isn't she? Surprise jumped through the enjoyment. You made these? Eve shrugged. I had some time. Hey, the troops have arrived, Jeff said, walking up behind them and clapping Dante and AJ on the shoulders. Anybody up for a friendly game of cutthroat? Never played, AJ said as he downed the last bite. Oh, it's easy, Dante said. Simple, Jeff agreed. Come on, Gabe's racking them up downstairs. Lead on, my friend, Dante said as he grabbed Eve's hand. Lead on. Jeff turned first, followed by Dante and Eve. However, just before he followed, AJ reached down and grabbed another brownie. He'd hate for them all to be gone by the time he got back. Since Dante had met her at her car out front 2 hours earlier, Eve had felt like a dog on a leash. He didn't let her go no matter where they went. It wasn't until she met up with Ashley in the basement that Dante had the good sense to let her hand go. Either that, or he knew she couldn't escape by way of the stairs without going by him first. He was playing pool with the others, and although they had invited her to join them, it had taken very little to convince them she wanted nothing more than to sit at the bar and watch. Fun party, Ash, Eve said, turning to the bar where Gabe's wife worked restocking chips.
You think? Ashley pushed a wedge of wavy blonde hair from her face. I think Gabe went a little overboard on the guest list. Well, you invite this one, and this one invites that one, who just has to bring the other one. And pretty soon my house is trashed. Eve reached for a Cheeto. Just be glad we're not still in high school. Ugh, ain't that the truth? The noise level at the pool table crescendoed suddenly, yanking Eve's attention to across the room. On one side, Gabe stood, taunting Dante, who stood on the other side. Na 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 na. Lucky, lucky, lucky. That was so lucky, Dante said dismissively. Lucky? That was good. Good? Ha! You want to see good? I'll show you good. Eve laughed and turned back to Ashley, who raised her eyebrows. Well, at least some of us are older than high school, Ashley said, shaking her head in mock exasperation. So, have you seen Lisa lately? Eve asked as Ashley ripped into another bag of Doritos. She was up making veggie dip in the kitchen last I saw her. Yeah! A cheer erupted at the pool table. Figures, Eve said, looking over as Gabe and Jeff high-fived each other over their apparent win. The men play while the women work. Without us, they'd starve. Without us, they probably wouldn't even notice, Eve said, nodding toward the ruckus celebration still going on behind them. That's scarily true, Ashley said. Then she looked at the bar. Well, I'd better go back up and make sure the others don't starve. You want to come? For 1 half-second, Eve considered saying yes, but when she looked over at Dante, he smiled and closed one eye as a silent sign he was happy she was there. No, I'll stay. Bravery, Ashley said sarcastically. I like that. Bravery or insanity? Eve asked. Ashley raised both hands to indicate she had no intention of choosing. You said it. With a laugh, she started for the stairs, but just before she got there, Gabe stopped her with an arm. She allowed herself to be folded into his embrace. Eve's heart turned over at the sight. Yeah, I said it all right. Just then, AJ walked up and pulled a handful of Doritos from the bowl. So are you the official chip guard tonight? Chip guard? Eve asked, her hand falling from where it had been combing through her hair absently. AJ motioned to the bowls. Well, you're not eating, and I know you're not watching, so I figured you must be guarding. Oh, the melancholy melted away from her as she bought into the joke. Yeah, that's right. I'm the chip guard, and if you go over your limit, I'm authorized to karate chop you in half. Her tone was so serious that AJ's face fell, and he stopped eating. After a moment, she laughed. I'm kidding. I don't even know karate. His eyes were saucer-like. I'm glad, because you had me worried there for a minute. Gingerly, he reached into the bowl to snag another chip, keeping his gaze on her lest she really karate chop him. So, where's your friend? Eve asked AJ as Dante racked up the pool balls noisily. AJ sat down on a stool by the wall. Melody? Eve nodded. No could come. Midnight madness at Galaxy Shoes. Out on Edgebrook? He nodded, clearly surprised that she knew it. I love that place. They've got really nice stuff. Real affordable, too. In fact, I think I got these there. She lifted her foot to reveal a silver-strapped heel and 5 perfectly painted toenails. Letting her foot drop, she reached for a Cheeto. So, what does your friend, Melody, do there? AJ shrugged. She works the floor, whatever that means. Ugh, the floor. Fun. Give me a rack of clothes and a back room any day. Hey, AJ, Jeff called. You in or out? Oh, I'm in. He stood, took 1 step away, then stopped, and grabbed another chip. Eve laughed at the taking my life in my hands look he shot her. Quickly, he wiped the excess cheese on the leg of his black cargo pants. You going to play or eat? Dante asked. If I'm real lucky, both, AJ said. He slid his stick back and forth through his fingers, sizing up the table. What are we, anyway? Stripes, Gabe offered cannily from the other side. Solids, Dante quickly corrected. AJ nodded and carefully lined up his shot, taking aim at the 2-ball. One crack, and the 2 skittered into the side pocket. "Way to go, partner," Dante said happily as he stepped over to where Eve sat and wrapped a casual arm around the back of her chair. "Nothing like Friday night with friends." "Nope," Eve agreed, and this time the word almost made it to her heart. At 12:15, Dante sidled up to her again. His arm had a way of finding itself a place around her. "You ready?" "For what?" Eve asked in genuine surprise. "I'm on shift tomorrow at 6:30. He looked at his watch. "I'm looking at 4 hours of sleep max, the way it is." "Oh," Eve said, suddenly seeing where this conversation was headed, and frantically she looked around for a way out. Her gaze landed on the near-empty chip bowls. I thought I'd stay and help clean up a little." "Oh," he said, taken aback for a moment. "Well, then at least walk me to my car?" She tried to think of a logical excuse, but came up with nothing. Slowly, she slid off the stool. "Okay." Dante's arm rested across her waist as they started for the steps. "You're not bailing on us, are you?" Gabe asked when he noticed. "Early shift tomorrow," Dante said, slapping Gabe's outstretched hand. "Well, don't be a stranger." "Don't worry." Together, they went to the stairs where Dante turned and waved at the others. "Night, guys." "Night," Jeff said, smiling happily at Eve even as he said it. "Night," AJ said without really looking up. He was too busy lining up his break shot. With that, they left the basement. Upstairs was much less crowded than it had been earlier. Apparently, Dante wasn't the only one who had an early shift the next morning. "Thanks, Ash," Dante said when they came upon Ashley picking up cups in the living room. "Oh, you're welcome. You guys leaving?" "Gonna have to, but it was fun," Dante said before Eve could get a word out. "Well, thanks for coming." "Thanks for having us," he said with an easy smile. Us. Eve hated that word. It made her feel as though she had no identity of her own. It was ironic how wonderful that word had felt during another part of her lifetime, and how horrible it felt now. They crossed through the dwindling crowd and out into the cold night air. Slowly, they strolled down the sidewalk to his shiny black Mustang. When they got to the car, he leaned against it and draped both forearms over her shoulders. "So, we still on for next Saturday?" he asked. "The museum?" She looked at him, and another face drifted through the air where he stood. Its appearance sent her heart and gaze fleeing. "Yeah, I guess so." "You sure you want to go?" "Yeah," she said, forcing the sadness down in her heart. "It sounds like fun." Dante's eyes softened as he gazed at her. "It's always fun when I'm with you." She tried to smile, but the mere motion hurt the center of her heart. Slowly, he leaned into her space, and in the next second, his lips were on hers. Tears sprang to her heart and to her eyes. Nothing about this felt right. Nothing. Her hand went up and landed on his chest, more to push him away, if need be, than from affection. When he broke the kiss, his gaze drilled right through her skull. "You take care of yourself," he said softly. Her head nodded as her gaze found the concrete at her feet. The chill around her suddenly invaded her spirit as well, and she put her hands on her arms to ward it off. Instantly, he wrapped her in the scratchiness of his sport coat. "You better get back in before you freeze." "Yeah," she said, willing the tears not to find her voice. After a moment, he released her and reached for his door handle. "Night, Eve." "Night." She backed up and stood there on the curb, watching him get into the car. The headlights sprang to life, and then the car sliced its way into the night. Her gaze dropped from the departing taillights to the darkness of the asphalt as her spirit took a nosedive for the ground. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. What she did instead was sigh and turn back for the house. It made no sense to go back in. They thought she had left. But if only for a few more minutes, she needed to be with friends. So she treaded her way up the walk and to the door. Alone in the darkness was no fun. Even together in the darkness wasn't fun anymore. Light did nothing to exonerate the pitch blackness in her soul, but at least, she thought, opening the door and stepping back inside, the shell that was left of her felt better in the light. Chapter 3. However, once in the house, Eve wondered why she had come back. Nobody she knew seemed to be anywhere around. Suddenly, exhaustion invaded her being, and all she wanted to do was sit down and disappear for a few minutes. She slipped around the room to the far end where the couch stood in front of the babbling television. With one hand, she grabbed some popcorn from the bowl as she collapsed into the off-green leather, not really paying attention to who was sitting on the other end. One piece of popcorn was already in her mouth when the other occupant looked over at her and sat up. "Hey, I thought you left," AJ said, and when Eve looked over at him, she couldn't quite believe she hadn't noticed him. The orange of his jersey should have been hard to miss. "Dante left. I thought I ought to stay and help clean up," she said, settling back into the couch. "What are you watching?" "Oh, I think it's MTV or something. I don't know. I just sat down." She watched for a minute, but quickly bored of the images. "You're not playing pool anymore?" In exasperation, he shook his head, and the soft brown hair beneath his baseball cap moved with it. "I gave up on that one. Jeff and Gabe started playing cutthroat. I think I was out in 5 shots. Friends, they're such a pain." He flashed a bright, toothy smile at her. "Tell me about it." Carelessly, he wiped the bottom of his nose once and reached for more popcorn. However, 3 kernels didn't make the whole trip and landed in various places across the floor and on his knee. As if it was easy, he picked one up, flipped it into the air, and caught it in his mouth. Slowly, he chewed that piece before munching on more of the ones in his hand as his gaze took in the television images. Despite herself, Eve was fascinated. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" he asked in genuine surprise. That throwing the popcorn in the air and catching it thing. I always get popcorn everywhere when I try it." Disbelief crossed his face. "It's not hard. You just have to gauge your trajectory." Skepticism reigned over her. "Oh, yeah, sure, sounds easy." "No, here, I'll show you." He scooted a little closer to her and flipped a piece in the air. At the last second, his mouth moved under it, and munching, he looked at her. "See? Easy." He laughed at her uncertainty. "Here, try it." Eve looked at the popcorn in her hand doubtfully. "Just throw one up and catch it," he instructed, and as he said it, he demonstrated the technique again. She considered arguing but decided against it. Carefully, she took one piece of popcorn in her other hand and threw it into the air. However, her strength was too much for the piece, and it flew backward over the couch. A laugh escaped from her instantly, but she squelched it when she looked at him. "Oops." He sat for a second, trying not to laugh, but he was helpless to stop it. When he finally regained his composure, he said, "Come on, try again. Think straighter this time." Straighter. Concentrating on the piece in her hand, Eve threw it into the air. However, this one landed squarely on the coffee table. Although she tried to dive for it, she didn't even come close. "I don't think I'm getting this." "I noticed," he said. "Here." He backed up on the couch a little, picked a piece out of his hand, and aimed it at her. "Open your mouth." "What?" "You heard me. Open your mouth." Trying not to choke laughing, she did as instructed. The first piece hit her in the nose and bounced off. She was laughing too hard to keep her mouth open. No, try it again," he said excitedly, grabbing another piece. Forcing herself to, she squelched the laughter and opened her mouth. From the corner of her eye, she saw the 3 practice throws he did before he actually let go of the popcorn. This one landed right on her tongue, and jubilation surged through her. "Yes!" Not really thinking, she threw her hands in the air and found one of his coming the other direction. I told you, he said as he casually flipped another into the air and caught it himself. It's easy. She munched her piece. And how long did this easy thing take you to learn? Oh. He threw one in the air, but it sailed past the arm of the couch. His gaze followed it all the way to the floor. For a second, he looked at where it landed. Then he shrugged. 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years? Hey, I was only 4 at the time. What do you expect? He reached for some more from the bowl. You're a natural, though. Another laugh engulfed her. Yeah, I could tell. She grabbed some Doritos and collapsed back into the cushions to watch the screen. For a moment, they just sat enjoying. Then AJ pushed himself up and turned to her. Here's something. What's that? She asked, not even thinking she should be nervous. He leveled a serious gaze at her as if he was about to ask the meaning of life. Doritos or popcorn? Doritos or popcorn what? Casually, he spun and flopped back onto the couch. Which one do you like better? She considered as if she actually was trying to determine the meaning of life. Doritos. Me too. He sat forward and fished the last couple Doritos pieces out of the bottom of the bowl. Except the ranch kind. I hate those. They're not so bad. His nose wrinkled at the thought, and he shivered all over. I can taste them for days afterward. She laughed. After another moment, he shivered again. Okay, here's one, she said without really looking at him. Cheetos or potato chips? Lay's or Pringles? Lay's. Ugh, Cheetos, definitely. Okay, Pringles. Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd have to go with Pringles. Her mind traced through all the things she liked about both, but she couldn't really come up with her own decision. How about popcorn or kettle corn? He asked before she had decided. Ugh, not kettle corn. That's sick. His eyes narrowed in concentration and then brightened. Popcorn or Cracker Jacks? Definitely Cracker Jacks. That toothy smile was back. Me too. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for, Ashley said, walking into the room behind them and obviously not seeing them as she picked up trash from the floor. Eve sat up and realized that there were precious few partiers left. Instantly, she sat forward and grabbed for the empty chip bowls. She looked back at AJ and held one bowl that still had some chips in it out to him. You want some more? He dusted the salt off of his hands and shook his head. That's enough for me. Without prompting, he stood, picked up 2 of the bowls and 3 cups with liquid in them. Oh, Ashley said when she saw them. I didn't mean you had to help. Well, we helped make the mess, AJ said. Surely we can help clean it up. When Eve wound her way into the kitchen, she found Lisa at the sink doing dishes. So, is this where you've been hiding out all night? Eve asked, cozying up to her friend as she set the chip bowls on the counter. Lisa looked at her and smiled. I was afraid Ash might drown in all these dishes. AJ set the things he was carrying on the counter next to Eve's offerings and slipped back out of the room. Lisa's gaze followed him out questioningly. Where's Dante? Oh, he left a little while ago. Early shift. Ah, Lisa said with a nod as she went back to the dishes. Eve surveyed Lisa disapprovingly. You know, you really shouldn't be on your feet doing dishes. Why not? Well, aren't you supposed to take it easy in your condition? A pained look spread across Lisa's face. My condition? It sounds like I have malaria or something. Here, let me have that. Eve reached out and grabbed the scratcher before Lisa could really protest. You go sit down. Let me do these. AJ returned with another armload of cups. What do I do with these? Dump them out in the sink, and you can probably just trash them, Eve said as she started washing bowls. At her elbow, AJ dumped them out one at a time, and then stacked them together and threw them in the trash. Are Jeff and Gabe still in the basement? Lisa asked. Think so. I just heard the balls break, AJ said as he wound his frame around the island and headed for the dining room. Those guys. In frustration, Lisa stood and walked toward the stairs. At the top, she yelled down, Hey, are you guys going to play all night? Her words faded as she descended the stairs. "Okay, who brought the silly string?" Ashley asked, pushing a handful of trash into the can. "Silly string?" Eve asked, glancing behind her. "You're kidding, right?" "I wish," Ashley said as she held up 3 multicolored strands. "See? Silly string." "Now that's just sad." Ashley went back to the living room as Eve stacked another bowl in the rinse sink on top of the 3 that were already there. "I thought the dip was supposed to be on the chips," AJ said in exasperation. He held the bowl smeared with French onion dip out for Eve's inspection. She shook her head. "You give these people way too much credit." Her other hand transferred a sudsy bowl to the rinse sink as she took the smeared bowl from him. "Need me to rinse?" he asked, crossing behind her. "That would help." He took up position at the rinse sink and turned on the water. For 3 dishes, he was quiet. "Okay, here's one. Dishes or laundry?" "Ugh, neither." "No, not fair. You have to pick." He set a bowl in the drainer. "Do I get a dishwasher?" "And a washer and dryer, too, if you're real nice." The smile on his lips shone through his eyes. She considered the choices as she handed him the bowl that was no longer smeared. Dishes, I guess." He rinsed that bowl and set it with the others. "Here, hand me that," he said, pointing across her to the cabinet beyond. "What?" she asked, seeing only more stacked dishes to wash. "That, here." Without pretense, he reached across her to retrieve the towel. "Kitchen towel?" she asked teasingly. "Would that be the word you were looking for?" He picked up a rinsed dish and ran the cloth over it. "Yep, that would be the one." "Okay, remind me again why I thought this was a good idea," Ashley said as she lugged a table through the kitchen. "Oh, here," AJ said, setting the dish down and throwing the towel over the drying bowls. 3 steps, and he took the table from Ashley. "Where do you want it?" "Garage," Ashley said. "I'll go get the chairs." The upstairs was back in semi-order by the time Gabe, Jeff, and Lisa emerged from the basement 30 minutes later. Even most of the dishes had been put away. Lisa put the basement bowls where the others had already been cleared, and Eve sighed. "More?" "'Fraid so," Lisa said. "Here, Eve, I can get the rest of these," Ashley said as she gently pushed Eve. However, Eve reached past her and grabbed one of the bowls. 4 more bowls and I'm finished." Ashley shrugged. "Suit yourself." "So, who lost?" AJ asked, sitting down on one of the bar stools around the island. "I cleaned his clock," Gabe said, straightening his shoulders so that he stood a full head taller than Jeff. "And which clock would that be?" Jeff asked. "The one before or after you sank the 8-ball 3 times in a row without bothering to clear the rest of your trash off the table?" Gabe took a playful swing at Jeff, who easily deflected it. "Glad I got out when I did," AJ said, taking a sip from his glass. "Yeah, we noticed you bailed," Jeff said. "What's up with that?" "What's up? I got smart. That's what's up." Eve set the last dish in the drainer and looked around. "Is that everything?" "Think so," Ashley said, coming in from the dining room. "No thanks to somebody." As she passed by him, she rammed a hip into Gabe, who, unaware of her intentions, spilled his drink down the front of himself with a hit. Annoyed, he wiped his chin off. "And would you be referring to anyone in particular with that statement?" "I wouldn't know," she said in exasperation. Gabe looked at the other 2 guys with a "what did I do" look. Then he shrugged and pulled up a stool. "Well, I thought the party was a great success." "Uh-huh," Eve said as she leaned against the sink. "And next time you're going to come do dishes all night while us girls go down and play pool." "No problem. When are you coming?" Gabe asked gamely. However, Jeff punched him. "She said dishes, man. You've really got to know when to shut up." "He's got a point," AJ said, pointing at Jeff. "Well, thanks, Eve," Ashley said as she laid the towel over the oven bar. "I hate to think how long it would have taken me to clean this up." "No problem," Eve said. Then she looked down at the thin silver watch she had just put back on her wrist. Well, I hate to say it, guys, but I'm going to have to get going too. Our shipments are supposed to start coming in on Monday. That means no sleep next week.
Me too, AJ said, sliding off the stool. I'm supposed to help my sister move tomorrow. Oh, joy.
We'd better get home too, Lisa said as she rubbed a hand over Jeff's back. I think my feet could use a nice, long bath.
Mine too, Jeff said as he turned to her, smiling.
Eve smiled at them in spite of the memories. Gabe, Ash, thanks for a really nice night. It was fun, Ashley said as they all started toward the door.
Oh, and if you find popcorn over by the couch, AJ said as Eve retrieved her small jacket from the closet and slipped into it, that was Eve's fault.
Ah, she said as if she'd been wounded. That wasn't very nice. She took a swing and caught his shoulder with her fist. He shrugged away from the punch even as he laughed.
Well, I didn't want her to blame me.
Ashley and Gabe laughed.
Well, come back and we'll make some more popcorn just for you, Gabe said as he laid a hand on Ashley's shoulder. Just tell me when, AJ said. I never pass up free food.
Eve leveled an exasperated gaze at Ashley. He's such a guy.
You act like that's a bad thing, AJ said, looking at her with a smile in his eyes that rounded down into his apple-curved cheekbones.
One look at Ashley, and she and Eve said, "It is." Goodbyes flew in all directions as the last 4 partygoers stepped out into the cold night. At last, the door closed behind them, and the light of the street lamps guided their journey down the sidewalk.
Drive careful, you two, AJ said, waving to Jeff and Lisa when they got to the end of the sidewalk, and he and Eve started to turn the other direction. You too, Jeff said, and then he stopped. When he looked at Eve, all playfulness was gone. Do you want us to follow you home?
Eve's face scrunched in annoyance. I'm a big girl, Jeff. I think I can get home by myself.
Are you sure? Because it's really no trouble.
Eve smiled softly. It's an hour out of your way. Just get your wife home and into a bathtub. I'll be fine.
Okay, Jeff said uncertainly after a long moment. He stared at them, sizing up the situation and her. Do you want to call us when you get there?
I'll be fine, Eve said in exasperation. It's not like I haven't driven by myself before.
Well, which direction are you headed? AJ asked, breaking into the conversation.
South, Eve said shortly.
I'm headed south. I'm going as far as Elgin. I can follow you that far if you want.
Eve looked at Jeff for his blessing. Happy now?
Jeff took a moment to assess AJ and another to decide. Yeah, I guess that'll work.
Good, Eve said, crossing her arms over herself, because it's freezing out here. See you, Lise.
Call me, Lisa said as Eve turned and started for the cars. But 10 steps down the sidewalk, she realized that AJ wasn't with her. In annoyance, she turned just in time to see him shake Jeff's hand and nod. On her heel, she turned and stomped to her car. She wasn't a baby. She had managed to make it through 29 whole years without Jeff's constant protective gaze following her every move. How she had ever managed, she was sure he couldn't quite tell. Just then, she heard the tennis shoes on the concrete behind her, and in the next heartbeat, AJ jogged up beside her. I've got 10 cents that says you drive better than he does, AJ said.
10 cents? Boy, you have a lot of confidence in me.
Okay, make it 20, but that's my final offer. She glanced at him skeptically. Hey, he said, his tone serious. I have to eat this week, you know. Eve shook her head and laughed, and as mad as she was at the whole situation, for some reason, she just couldn't be mad with him at her side. Okay, 20 cents it is. Without question, he followed her across the street and to her car, and then it was time to say goodbye. Gratefulness poured through her as she glanced at him. I had fun tonight. He shrugged. It was a party. You were supposed to have fun. Well, it was extra fun. That apple rounded across the top of his cheek. I thought so too.
For a moment, she stood, not really wanting to leave. "Take care driving home," he said, and backed away from her. At the door to the little brown Honda Civic across the street, he stopped. "And don't lose me either." "Try to keep up," she retorted teasingly. He laughed as they both climbed in their cars. For all the darkness Eve should have found when she crawled into her car, there was a lightness in her heart that she hadn't remembered being there when she went to the party. Yes, it was good to be with friends. Keeping an eye on her little silver Celica wasn't all that much of a problem. It, like her, shone like a brilliant supernova under every light it flashed through. AJ retraced his mind through the night. They were fun. All of them. He liked hanging out with them. Even though he hadn't been a charter member of their little group, it seemed like he had been accepted with no questions. A smile broke onto his face as Gabe and Dante's jabs at each other floated through his mind. And even Ashley and Lisa, who had initially seemed so intimidating, actually turned out to be nice. Then there was Eve. He was glad for how her life seemed to be going, glad she had found Dante after the horrible year she had been through. Dante was perfect for her, classy, cultured. He could blend right into her life without so much as a misstep. They were perfect for each other, and AJ was happy for them. For Dante, but more for Eve. She was one special person, and she deserved to be treated with the respect that Dante obviously held her in. As his exit neared, AJ considered simply hanging back and following her to her turn. Jeff's admonition to make sure she was okay as they stood on the sidewalk flashed through AJ's mind. But then he remembered her obvious annoyance with Jeff's concern. No, she would know if he didn't turn off, so he pushed the pedal to the floor and raced to catch up with her. When his car was even with hers, he glanced over into her window. The light of her smile was shining as brightly as ever. With a slight wave and a smile, he told her goodnight through 2 car windows going 70 on the freeway, and then backed off and crossed the lanes to take his turn off. "God, I guess you're going to have to keep an eye on her the rest of the way." AJ smiled at the thought. God, it seemed, had done a pretty good job of that to this point. Somehow Eve had thought that AJ would find a way to follow her all the way home. Not that she wanted him to, of course, but somehow she figured Jeff had told him to. When the little brown car disappeared into the darkness off the ramp, Eve couldn't help but feel more alone than she had all night. She ran a hand through her hair and reached over to turn up the radio. She was a big girl, just like she had told Jeff. Fun or no fun, she was a big girl who was now on her own. The problem was, it felt far more like no fun than anything. Chapter 4. "Have you nailed down the plus-size selection yet?" Mary Jo Brockmeyer, Eve's boss, asked as she strode through the room to her drawing table. "I'm working on swimsuits," Eve said as she worked her way through the buyer's catalog on her desk. "And then you're finished?" "Yeah." "Good. We need to get this summer line finalized before Thanksgiving." Mary Jo pulled her white pantsuited frame onto the stool across the way and set her shimmering gold reading glasses on her nose. At one time, Mary Jo had been the height of fashion, but 3 kids and 40 extra pounds hadn't helped in that department. Still, she knew her stuff, and she was consistently on target with what to buy, how much to buy, and when to buy. As she went back to her work, Eve thought how glad she was that Dustin had pushed her to take this job in the first place. Despite the sometimes long hours and out-of-town trips, he had said it was an opportunity she just couldn't pass up. He had always had the uncanny ability to know what was the right opportunity when. She missed that about him. Unconsciously, she splayed one set of fingers under her hair and dropped it onto her shoulder. She had learned a lot in the last 2 years, and only part of that was about the fashion industry. "What do you think about this one?" Eve asked, holding up a drawing of a frilly black and turquoise number. "What do you think?" Mary Jo asked, gazing over the top rim of her glasses. Slowly, Eve set the catalog on her desk and bit the inside of her cheek, lost in thought. It's cute, but the cut of the bodice looks binding to me. It seems like it's too high up under the arm to really be very comfortable. And your gut says? There's something better, Eve said as she flipped that page over. Mary Jo smiled, and the light freckles on her nose danced under the shimmering of her glasses. Good girl. I'll spot you 14 points, AJ said. 14 points? Lerone Barnes asked next to him as they sat in the ambulance eating lunch in the grocery store parking lot. You've got to be kidding me. AJ took a bite of his sandwich and grabbed for his root beer. It's charity, man. I'm being generous here. Generous? Ha! Generous would be giving me a real chance. There ain't no way Jacksonville will score more than 7, and that's if they're real lucky. So, then, you're betting that the Titans can't make more than 21? The Titans can make 21 in their sleep. I said more than 21, AJ said, emphasizing the difference with his root beer can. And I said there ain't no way I'm taking that bet. I ain't no fool. Really? AJ asked, looking over at the young man who had been his partner for 6 months. 'Cause you look an awful lot like one to me. Man, you are so funny, they ought to put you on The Tonight Show. Well, they called last week, but I had to turn them down. AJ took another bite. So you're really not going to take my bet? No, I'm really not going to take your bet. AJ shrugged. Your loss. No, Lerone said slowly. It would be my loss if I took that bet. I could just say, bye-bye, little 20. The radio between them squawked to life. High-rise heart attack, Buckner and Robin. In a flurry of wrappers and cans, they threw the rest of lunch in the bags as AJ started the ambulance. Dispatch, Lerone said, grabbing the relay. This is Unit 5. We're on it. 10-4, the response came. Well, so much for a relaxing lunch, AJ said, angling the ambulance into traffic as he flipped the emergency lights and siren on. And I thought this job might be boring. AJ glanced over at his partner. Ain't nothing boring about it. By the time Eve made it home, it was after 8. That was okay. The less time she had to spend in the apartment, the better. She went into the little office off the kitchen and dropped her work things next to the drawing table. With a yank, she shrugged out of her black jacket and hung it on the chair. Heels were the next thing off, and by the time she made her way back to the kitchen, the only parts of her outfit left were her hose, her straight black miniskirt, and the white button-down shirt. For good measure, she unbuttoned another button of the shirt and pulled the tail of it out. She would change eventually, but for now, just being in the apartment and not falling apart were enough. She always hated this time of day. On his days off, this was the time that she had always enjoyed most with Dustin. Either there would be a glass of wine waiting for her, or dinner would be on the table, or even just the fact that she could be with him again was enough to make it the best time of day. Now, there was just emptiness filling the air around her to the point that sometimes it was hard to breathe. Offhandedly, she flipped the dark hair back over her shoulder and reached into the refrigerator for the shrimp sauté she had managed to make 3 nights before. Even cooking, which was normally something she loved to do, had lost its mystique. Without someone to share it with, what was the point? She pushed the plate into the microwave and hit the number 2 button. Depressing, she thought as she opened the mostly empty refrigerator and looked inside for something to go with the shrimp. Everything was depressing. Not really paying attention to her own actions, she reached in and grabbed a bottle of water, twisted off the lid, and pitched it into the trash. Another meal for one. Another night all alone in a place that felt utterly devoid of life. When the microwave dinged, she pulled her plate out, grabbed a fork, and made her way to the living room. The couch bed, which she hadn't bothered to push back in from the night before, took up most of the room, so she slipped past it to the chair. With one hand, she picked up the remote and hit power. Noise, blessed, wonderful noise, filled the room, and she laid the remote down. It didn't matter what it was, news, sports, movie, music. As long as it filled some piece of the deafening silence, it was welcome. Pushing all of the thoughts from her, she sat back and forked a small amount of rice into her mouth. This was called getting on with your life, and as much as she hated it, she knew it was the space she was doomed to live out her days. "How was work?" AJ's mom asked when the two of them were seated at the little table over chili macaroni. "Fine," he said. They could have tape-recorded the conversation and just played it over each night. The parts never changed, and after almost 2 years, he had the whole thing memorized. "You?" "Fine." She ate a piece of macaroni. "We got magnolias in, ugliest things you've ever seen. The flowers were the size of quarters, and the leaves were pitiful yellow. Did you get that box taken over to Chelsea's?" "No, I didn't have time." "How long does it take to drop a box off?" "I figured she'd find 6 other things she forgot, so I might as well wait." "She should have let me help her move," his mother said. "We got it done," he said. "It wasn't that hard." "Yeah, but she already forgot a box of clothes. Who knows what else she forgot?" "Chelsea could forget 6 boxes of clothes, and she wouldn't exactly freeze to death," he said, shaking his head. "Just because you wear the same pair of jeans for 3 weeks. You should be happy. Less laundry that way," AJ said. "Less laundry, less water. Less water, less money to the city. See, it's a good thing." Slowly, her dark-tinged red hair shook side to side. "When did you start worrying about water bills?" "The first time my water got cut off because I hadn't paid it." "Well, at least LA was good for something." Every extended conversation eventually wound back around to LA, no matter how far away it seemed at first. "Imagine that. You thought I'd ruin my life, and I actually learned something useful." "Yeah," his mother said. "Imagine that." His interest in the chili mac waned, and he stood. "I'm going out to the garage." He heard the sigh, even though it wasn't audible. "Don't play too loud. I don't want Mrs. O'Malley to call the cops again." "I'll try to keep it down," he said as he bent to kiss her cheek before he made a hasty exit. The 10 o'clock anchors were busy reporting the day's events before Eve finally talked herself out of the chair so she could shower and get ready for bed. She ran water over her dish and put it in the dishwasher just as a small smile crossed her face. "Which do you like better, dishes or laundry?" he asked again, and she laughed softly. Dishes or laundry? What a question. Grateful for something else to focus on, she closed the door and thought back to the party. Her mind skipped right over the depressing points to those moments that held some kind of levity. Almost every one of those involved one person in particular, and her heart smiled at the thought of him. He seemed so utterly free of any and all encumbrances like propriety and respectability. Not that he was an oaf, but he just didn't seem to really care what anyone else thought. It must be nice to live that way. In the bathroom, she snapped on the light. She started the shower and gazed at the woman gazing back at her from the mirror. With the practice of 100,000 times, she reached up and clipped her hair up. Thoughts of their few moments together slipped through her mind, and she shook her head so that the tendrils of hair that had escaped the clip danced. It had been more than a year since she had laughed that hard. He was such a nut. It would have been impossible not to laugh. "Here, open your mouth." She laughed outright at that thought as she slid out of the skirt. Never in her imagination could she have pictured doing something so childish, and yet nowhere in her being could she even care at this very moment what anyone else had thought. With a soft sigh, she stepped under the gentle cascade and closed her eyes. Dustin would have liked AJ. Eve could see them together, playing pool and trading jokes. Then again, there weren't too many people that Dustin didn't like. That was how he was. He had never met a stranger, and she doubted now whether the term stranger was even in his vocabulary. Her mind slipped back to her first company party and the 16 pairs of shoes they went through trying to find just the right ones. She knew he didn't really care, but because it made so much difference to her, he had. He knew nothing about fashion, but it was her passion, And he had learned. Tears stung her eyes when her mind fell over the memory of him sprawled at the bottom of the steps that now rose just above her, shoes in every color of the rainbow scattered on the steps above him. She wanted to laugh, but that hurt too much. The details of why he was hurrying to get the box to the top escaped her memory now, but the sight of him dazed at the bottom of those stairs still hadn't. Stairs. It was strange how easy it was to stay away from them, and yet how they kept pulling her, body and soul, to them. One simple set of stairs up to a bedroom that she still remembered him carrying her into the first time. It wasn't their first home, but it was the first one they had found, planned, and bought together. Water combined with the tears streaming from her heart as their happiness at entering that bedroom the first time melted into the first time she had entered it without him. Never could she have imagined how horrible that ache could be. She hadn't even had the heart to sleep in the bed that first night. Instead, the cold floor had held her as she cried. The 3 nights since that first one she had actually spent there without him were so miserable she had finally given up. Now, her bed was the couch, her living space anything that had nothing to do with those stairs. She didn't even turn the light on to them anymore. They were much better off, swathed in darkness and forgotten. Hitting the faucet to cut the water off, Eve put her head down and crushed her eyes closed in a futile attempt to get the memories to stop, but still they scratched across her heart like a serrated knife edge. Her face crumpled into the soft towel she pulled from the wall. She would never understand why God had looked at their love and thought it not worthy of intervening to spare Dustin's life. It had to have been God's choice, because she knew it wasn't Dustin's. He would have moved heaven and earth to get back to her, so the fact that he was no longer here put that choice clearly in God's corner. Avoiding eye contact with herself, she pulled her nightshirt over her still damp body, grabbed a hairbrush, and walked out of the bathroom. As she walked through the apartment, she ran a hand over each and every light switch, plunging the area behind her into spirit-crushing darkness. In the living room, she folded herself onto the couch bed and crossed her legs. The late-night comedians were bantering back and forth, and slowly she ran the brush through her hair. One day down, one night to live through, and tomorrow she would be that much closer to seeing Dustin again, to feeling his arms around her, to hearing the sound of his "I love you" ringing in her ears. One day and one night. She flipped her hair to the side and collapsed onto the pillow, watching the images flit across the screen. They were her only refuge, the only way her brain could have something else to focus on. Slowly her eyelids drooped forward, and fatigue caught her on its undercurrent. The yawn sank through her, and she pulled a blanket over her bare legs. They were joking about the president. She didn't get it, but she laughed anyway. A hollow, uncaring laugh as sleep dragged her down with it into its unknowing abyss. The rhythm flowed easily beneath AJ's drumsticks. Lost in the middle of the music, he always had the luxury of forgetting about how hollow his life really felt. Even in high school, when his latest crush broke up with him, or when he was cut from the soccer team, the music could always make the whole world disappear. True, most things seemed to be working out at the moment, but there was still that deep, intense need to just forget that everything else existed for a few hours. It was probably why the whole band dream had taken such hold of him. He remembered that first gig he and the guys had performed for the little nightclub nobody had ever heard of. That was the experience of a lifetime. To be swathed in darkness, punctuated by neon blue and fuchsia light, playing like he had nothing to lose and living like he never had before. He had been chasing that feeling ever since. The little garage was hardly a substitute, but he had no better choice. Working, honing something he wished was a natural talent into something a group might consider using, had all seemed so worth it until dirt broke, the electricity had been cut to the rat hole he was living in. The landlord generously called it an apartment. It wasn't. By that point, it was a simple choice between chasing a dream and starving to death. Amazingly, He had even managed to make himself believe it wasn't so bad for 3 days. But then they had laid off half the staff at the playground equipment store he grudgingly called his job. He was number 3 to get the news. Both drumsticks pounded their way into the crescendo. Reality. That's what his mom and Chelsea called it when he got back to Houston. From where AJ sat, reality was the prize at the end of playing the sucker's game of chasing a dream. When that song ended, he reluctantly looked at his watch and reached over with the drumstick to hit the off button. Tomorrow would be another day he didn't want to face. Carefully, he pulled the tarp over the drum set and sighed. If somehow he could just wake up tomorrow and be someone who actually enjoyed life, he would have given almost anything to make that happen. But life was life, and in AJ's world, that meant that enjoyment had nothing to do with it. Chapter 5. Starry Night is one of Van Gogh's premier works, Dante said as he stood at Eve's side on Saturday afternoon in the museum. How do you know that? She asked, wondering how he would know such a thing. That's what it says in this little brochure thingy. He held out the off-white paper as if reluctant to show her he was cheating. Oh, she smiled at his attempt to sound like he knew something about art. What else does it say? Let's see. He painted 2,200 works, including several that he copied from previous artists. And he cut off his own ear. Now, that one I knew. Dante looked at her with disgust. Why would somebody cut off their own ear? Ouch! Eve shrugged. Maybe he was tired of listening to Mrs. Van Gogh. He started to laugh, but seriousness crossed his face first. I think he was just crazy. Yeah, she said, the joke gone. Probably. So, who's your favorite artist? He asked as they drifted over to the next painting. Tall and dark, from hair to features, Dante was plenty nice looking, but he always seemed to be tiptoeing around her, and after months of that, it was getting old. Artist? I don't really have one. My favorite designer is Nicole Miller. Designer of what? Clothes, she said, as though that should be obvious. I love the lines she's done. Sleek, but fun. Slowly Dante shook his head, and a forced smile came to his face. I don't really know much about designers. I'm just lucky to not clash when I get dressed. She laughed. You sound like Dustin. As soon as the name was out of her mouth, she wished she could take it back. Dante's reaction, coupled with hers, said saying that name was the wrong thing to do. However, it was too late. So she plunged ahead in a futile attempt to salvage the mistake. He didn't know satin from rayon. Give him cotton, and he was happy. Dante's side of the conversation evaporated as they walked slowly to the next painting. He looked down at the brochure, and then up at the painting. This is one of Van Gogh's early works. Presumably before he cut his ear off, Eve said, fighting desperately to turn back time and do the last few minutes over again. Yeah, he said uncertainly. Presumably. He was trying so hard, Eve thought when she looked at him. He wanted this to work so badly, but as much as he wanted it to, it just wasn't. Do you really want to see the rest of the exhibits? She asked, hoping he would take the gentle hint and agree to stop the charade. When he looked at her, it was with a mix of confusion and sincere effort. Yeah, I think we should, since we're here. Since we're here. It was the worst reason for doing anything she'd ever heard. Pulling determination to her, she smiled. Well, then let's see what they say about this next one. Okay, that's it, Melody said, ripping the headphones off of AJ's ears before he even knew she was in the garage. For a single moment, the drum beat continued to transfer from his ears to his hand before he realized the beat in his ears was gone. Mel, what? He reached over in dazed confusion and hit the stop button with his stick. I didn't know you were coming. Sneak attack, Melody corkscrewed her mouth and narrowed her gaze at him. I can see that, he said as she reached around him and hit the power button. You're going to turn into a drum if you're not careful. Now, come on." She grabbed his hand and yanked with all of her blonde might. Grudgingly, he allowed himself to be pulled up. "Can I ask where we're going?" "Farron is meeting us in an hour." "Farron?" he asked as she pulled the tarp out of the storage bin. "Who's Farron?" "A girl from work. I met her last week, and she's perfect for you." He exhaled in frustration. "Mel." "No, this one isn't like the others. She's really cool, and she's really cute, and I told her I would bring you." This was getting worse, and he closed his eyes. "Haven't we had this conversation already?" "Yes, we have. And if you would just be a little more cooperative, maybe we could stop having it." Melody threw half of the tarp to him. "Now cover that thing up, and let's go." "But I'm not even dressed." "That's why we're going to have to hurry." As slowly as possible, AJ helped her cover the drum set. "Would it matter if I said I didn't want to go?" "No." "I didn't think so." "Come on. I know what you can wear, so Farron will fall head over heels for you." Melody grabbed his hand and pulled his reluctant body from the garage. "You know that nice shirt I gave you for your birthday last year? The one that feels like a wool sack?" They trekked through the living room and to the stairs. "Going out?" his mother asked from her perch on the recliner. "Yes," Melody said, just as he said, "No." Melody yanked him in front of her and pushed him up the steps to his room. Once there, he sat down on the bed and watched her scour through his closet. "See, this shirt," she said, pulling the light purple pressed button-down shirt out. "And these pants, black Dockers. And this belt, thin black with a gold buckle. And, oh yeah, here it is." His world spun when she pulled the next item out. "A tie? Mel." "Yes, a tie. Farron likes ties." "Just my luck." "Here." Melody thrust the clothes at him and pulled him up from the bed. "Now, get in there and get beautiful." His feet dragged across the floor. "Oh," she said just as he got to the door. "And do something with your hair. Mousse it or gel it or something. And no baseball cap." "No baseball cap? Ugh." With no energy whatsoever, AJ closed the door on her instructions. Why couldn't he just have a peaceful night at home with the rock music blowing his brains out? Why was that so much to ask? Some type of fast food would have been fine with Eve. At least then they wouldn't have had to endure hours of forced conversation. However, Dante had no intention of taking somebody like her to anything but the best, which meant they ended up at a French restaurant staring at menus listing things she couldn't pronounce and prices she knew he couldn't afford. "Really, we could go somewhere else," she whispered, using her menu as a screen from the rest of the restaurant. "Don't be silly," Dante said, although the tinge of white circling his face told her he was lying with each word. "Go ahead, order whatever you want." She wanted to argue, but that did no good with Dante. She had learned that much. He was being nice, and she couldn't be mean to someone who was trying so hard. With no other options, she ordered the cheapest salad on the menu when the waiter arrived. "You don't want an entree?" Dante asked in puzzled concern. "I'm not all that hungry," Eve said, smiling as she handed the menu to the waiter. "Oh," Dante ordered quickly, and the waiter left. An incessant, gloomy silence settled over their table as they both fought to come up with something to say. "So..." "What?" He smiled uncertainly as their words collided awkwardly. "Sorry, you first." "Oh, I was just going to ask what else you do for fun," she said. "For fun?" Bit by bit, awkward dropped away from him, and he slid an arm over the back of his chair casually. Well, I like to watch racing." "Like what kind?" "Drag racing, mostly, but stock car is cool, too." "Oh," she said, trying to get interested into that sound. "That's cool. You ever been to a race?" "A couple. They were pretty cool, all the crashes and stuff." She nodded, searching the files of her brain for any information she had on stock car racing. The more she searched, the less she found. "I like movies, too," he offered. "Oh, really? What kind?" she asked, pouncing on that topic. Finally, they had hit on something they could talk about. "Action," Dante said, nodding. "But I really like the sci-fi stuff. Star Trek, Aliens." "Star Wars," Eve added, because that was the only one she knew. His face scrunched incredulously. "Star Wars? No, I mean real science fiction." She wanted to ask why Star Wars didn't qualify as science fiction, or what made the others better, but from his tone she knew he didn't think Star Wars was even worthy of discussion. "So, how about you?" he asked, leaning onto the table and staring at her with that intent look that scattered her nerves. "What kind of movies do you like?" "Chick flicks mostly," she said, fighting like mad to squelch the sigh. "Action's okay. Sci-fi is all right if that's the only thing available, but no horror. No way. I hate horror movies." Fire lit into his eyes. "Ooh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The all-time great movie." Eve pushed her revulsion under her need to appear interested. "I've never seen it." "Oh, man. Then we're going to have to rent it some night. It's unbelievable." Good word, Eve thought, for the date as much as for the movie. "You're going to have to come over some night," he continued, getting more excited about the idea the longer he talked. "We can rent movies and order in. It'll be great." Thankfully, the waiter picked that moment to arrive with dinner. Agreeing would have been the biggest lie of her life. "Your tie's crooked," Melody said as they stood in the line to get into the bar Houston. "It's too tight," AJ said, yanking at it. "It's crooked." Exasperated, Melody reached over, straightened it, and then cinched it tighter for good measure. When he reached for it, she glared at him. "Don't touch it. It's perfect." No, perfect would have been being home in front of a television or banging on his drums. This was not perfect. At the door, they showed their IDs and entered the smoke and lights. "I told her to be by the dance floor," Melody said as she grabbed his hand, presumably so he couldn't get away. 10 deep into the crowd, Melody spotted Farron, and without warning, he was suddenly being dragged past, over, and right through people. Sorry, excuse me," he said, fighting to keep his balance. In the next heartbeat, Melody stopped, and AJ's momentum just about carried him right into her. "Farron!" Melody squealed as the small girl in the tight leather pants squealed in the same pitch when she saw them. AJ narrowed his eyes to ward off the sound. "I thought you were never going to get here," Farron gushed, hugging Melody as though they hadn't seen each other in years. Then Farron glanced at AJ and stopped cold. "This isn't..." Melody stepped back. "Farron Jarrell, this is AJ Knight." His manners were the only thing that pulled his hand up to meet hers. "Hi." Wide-eyed, Farron took his hand as she stared at him until he thought more than his tie must be crooked. "What?" "Oh, Melody, you said he was hot. But wow," Farron said, arching her eyebrows for emphasis. "Wow." AJ retrieved his hand and slipped back an inch at the passion in that statement. "It must be the tie," he said, hoping that would throw her off and wishing his brain could think in a logical pattern. "And funny, too," Farron said, although she didn't laugh. "Melody, you are some matchmaker." When AJ looked at Melody, her smile said she already knew that. "Come on, AJ, let's go see if you dance as good as you look," Farron said. Without waiting for him to accept, she grabbed his hand and headed for the dance floor. There was no getting out of this nightmare, so with a sigh, he allowed himself to be led like a prisoner to the guillotine. "I had such a great time today," Dante said softly as they stood at her car next to the museum, which had been closed for hours by that point. Eve couldn't quite believe how serious he sounded, nor could she quite fathom the look in his eyes. How could he not see how extraordinarily bad they fit together? "So, what do you say? Next week? My place? Dante asked, gazing at her as if she held all the secrets of the universe. Next, She ducked her head and fumbled for anything to keep her from having to say yes. Finally, she tossed her hair back from her face. Lisa and I are supposed to go shopping on Saturday. Baby stuff. True, she hadn't called Lisa, but as long as Lisa didn't know the whole story, she would agree without question. Friday, then, he said. Friday I'm helping my mom hang curtains in her living room. Again, not the whole truth, but her mother had asked for her help a month ago, and if she showed up and said she was ready, they could hang curtains. Oh, Dante said, and his gaze dropped from her face. Gently, he reached over and took her hand. I'd really like to see you again, Eve. I really like being with you. The pleading of his gaze tore her heart out. Well, maybe the next weekend, she said finally, hating herself for not just telling him no and being done with it. As much as she wanted to, her heart just wouldn't let her. Okay, he said, brightening instantly. The next weekend, then. His one hand slipped up to her shoulder, and he bent forward. She couldn't explain it, but every time his lips touched hers, her heart fell into her shoes. Why was she kissing him? Why was he kissing her? Why were they standing there together with nothing between them except his pity for her and her need to not reject his kindness? When he pulled back, that look was back in his eyes. I can't wait. Yeah, she said softly as he pulled her into his chest, and the neither can I got lost. Watch this, Farron said as she set the full shot glass on her forehead. Its balance wavered precariously, and AJ fought not to rescue it before it splattered everywhere. Finally, she broke the pose, took the shot glass off her forehead, downed the shot in one gulp, and looked at AJ. Your turn. Oh no, he said instantly, backing away from the challenge. I don't have that great a balance. All the better, Farron said, grabbing for one of the full glasses on the table. She held it out to him. Come on. No, I don't think so, AJ said. I'm driving. Melody can drive, Farron said as she looked at Melody. Can't you, Mel? Yeah, Melody said softly from where she sat on the other side of the table. Sure, I can drive. Go ahead, AJ. One look at Melody's vanished smile told AJ that the evening was going as badly as he thought it was. Come on, AJ Way-J, show me what you've got, Farron said, sliding closer to him and wrapping her vine-thin arm through his. Repulsion coiled around him. I think it's about time for us to make tracks. Make tracks? Farron asked, backing up only slightly. But it's early. I've got work in the morning, he said, standing. Melody looked at him with wide-eyed shock as he pulled her to her feet. He looked back at the anaconda still slithering in her chair. Take care, Farron. Yeah, she said sullenly. You too. Melody's eyes were the size of small tires as he pushed her ahead of him to the door. It wasn't until they were in the parking lot that she actually got words to connect with her tongue. I cannot believe you just did that. Me? Okay, let's talk disbelief here, Mel. They crossed the parking lot, waiting only for one passing car as it sped by them. You set me up without even asking me, and then my date turns out to be Glenn Close's character from Fatal Attraction. Farron's nice, Melody protested. At his car, he crawled into the driver's seat, hit the unlock button for her, and slammed his door. I guess I'm going to have to take your word for that, because I certainly didn't see it. He started the car and backed out. They were in traffic before he looked at her again. She's not my type, Mel. A pout crossed Melody's features. Well, I'm beginning to think I don't know what your type is at all. Yeah, he said, nodding seriously. There's a good start. Bugs Bunny was racing across the screen when Eve pushed her eyelids open the next Saturday. She took one look at the television and closed her eyes in exhaustion. Vaguely, she remembered 2 a.m. 3 a.m. was clearer, and 4 o'clock was as clear as this moment. It was points after 5 that she faded out on again, and now here she was awake at 7 a.m., with no desire to ever wake up like this again. There were still mornings sparsely sprinkled across her life when she woke up that for a single moment she thought he was there with her. In some perverse way, she liked those mornings. She went to sleep hoping for them every night, because as bad as figuring out it was a dream was, those single moments were almost worth it. However, most mornings were like this, just misery. Hating Bug's chipper voice, she reached over and punched the remote, but she hit the channel button instead of power. Only $100 down can get you in your new apartment. Furnished and unfurnished units are available. You can use your table or ours, but come on down and see us. We are conveniently located just minutes from the Galleria. Eve's eyes flipped open. That's right. $100 can make the dream of having your own space or just a new place a reality. A new place. In a way, it sounded wonderful. In another, it sounded like death itself. A new place meant moving on, leaving the past behind, leaving Dustin behind. Her heart dropped at the thought. As long as she was in this place, there was that absurd thought that still said he might come home. That one morning, he would just walk back through that door again like nothing had ever happened. It seemed stupid, but her heart refused to see that. All it saw was that if she left, if she moved, he would have no way to find her if it had all been some horrible mistake on the part of the universe. She rolled over and fanned her hair out on the white pillow behind her. Without really thinking, her gaze traveled across the room to the off-white wall beyond. Prominently displayed in the center of that wall was the gold-framed picture of her in her wedding dress. Strange, she thought as she looked at it. There was no Dustin in that photo, just her and a black background. It was almost like a premonition of how her life would turn out. Just her alone, standing in a sea of blackness, smiling for all the world to see. What they couldn't see, what they could never even guess, was the number of tears behind that smile. Her mind drifted back to that awful week after she had picked up that phone and gotten that summons. Most of the ensuing week was a fog, but the bits and pieces she remembered stung her heart. Those around her probably thought she had been the Rock of Gibraltar. The truth was, it was all she could do to hold it together. It was as if she was but one small tremor away from total collapse from that moment to this. When she cried, she made sure no one was around. When she didn't, she wanted to. It wasn't that a piece of her had died. It was more that she herself had died in that fire. Heart and soul, she had died so that the only thing left was this body that had somehow not gotten the message. Slowly, her gaze slipped from the photo down the wall to the fragile pink crystal rose sitting on the table, and the fog broke. Pain seeped through her as her mind traced back to the moment she had first seen it. Her first birthday present, from him. She could still see his eyes shining in the knowledge that she was as in love with the present as she was with him. Her arms went around the pillow she held, and she crushed it to her chest, wishing it was him, but knowing it never would be again. "Don't miss out," the television announcer broke into her thoughts again. "Spaces are limited, and once they're gone, they're gone." Before sanity, or something like it, could retake control, Eve grabbed for the phone, wiped her eyes, and dialed the number on the screen. This has been White Knight, Book 2, The Courage Series, written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings.
You don't want to miss what comes next. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel so you never miss a second of the story.